What's up, guys? Today we're going to be talking about fight week nutrition and the acute weight cut. This is part 4 in our multiple part series. Part 1 was about fight camp nutrition. Part 2 was about the Excel spreadsheets that I created, how to use them. And then part 3 is actually going through those Excel spreadsheets just to see how to navigate them and how to best utilize them. I'm going to try to get through this in 30 minutes or less. Feel free to put this on 1.5 or 2 times speed and just roll through it, but we'll go ahead and get started. So first thing we need to talk about is fight camp versus fight week nutrition. Fight camp, this is a period of chronic weight loss due to a calorie deficit. So we're actually losing tissue from the body. Ideally, we're going to lose all of this tissue from fat, but some of it may come from muscle mass, but we're going to try to limit this as much as possible. During fight week, we're not actually losing any more tissue from the body. We're losing weight solely from manipulating the amount of water that is in the body. So what this means is because we're not losing any actual tissue from the body, we can and we should be eating at maintenance calories during this period. So some of the water manipulation strategies that we're going to talk about today are going to be glycogen depletion, water loading and restriction, sodium manipulation, fiber reduction, and then your last one, which is going to be what everyone thinks about when they think of a weight cut, is going to be your induced sweating. So first we're going to talk about glycogen depletion. Glycogen is simply just how our body stores carbohydrates in the muscles and in the liver. If you sound it out, carbohydrates, they are just carbons that are hydrated. So for each gram of glycogen that is stored in the body, it's going to carry about 3 grams of water with it. So if we deplete these glycogen stores, we're going to deplete the associated water that comes with that glycogen. So we're going to do this in 2 ways. One is going to be a low-carb diet, and 2 is going to be glycogen-reducing exercise. Glycogen-reducing exercise is going to be anything of moderate to high intensity. If you're hitting the pads or the bag that week, that's going to reduce some of your glycogen stores. So if we're bringing in less glycogen through the low-carb diet and we're also doing a little bit of exercise to get rid of the less glycogen stores that we have, we're going to decrease the amount of glycogen we're storing in our body. So we're going to do this low-carb diet for about 5 to 7 days leading into weigh-in. And what this means is low-carb diet for me means less than 50 grams per day. And for some of those people who like to work, quote-unquote, their weight off during the fight week, they can get away with a little bit more carbs, closer to 75 or 100 grams of carbs per day because they're doing more glycogen-reducing exercise. But similar to fight camp, regardless of how many carbs you're eating for that day, you should bias the carbs that you have allotted for that day closer to your training window. And through glycogen depletion, we can expect to get somewhere around 2% body weight loss. But again, this is a very rough estimate. Don't take it verbatim. It's going to vary from person to person along with every other strategy that we talk about today. So some low-carb foods are going to be eggs, meat and poultry, seafood, plain yogurt, avocado, nuts and seeds, nut butters, oils, and etc. Next, we're going to talk about water loading and restriction. So fluid balance in the body is going to be regulated by 2 hormones in particular. The first one is going to be vasopressin, which is going to promote the retention of water by the kidneys. It's going to be activated by changes in electrolyte concentrations. When vasopressin is released, it's going to signal the kidneys to reabsorb water. And then once these concentrations have normalized, the vasopressin is going to be turned down. The other one is aldosterone. This is going to promote the retention of sodium by the kidneys. So vasopressin is going to promote the retention of water. Aldosterone is going to promote the retention of sodium. So if sodium levels are in the blood are dropping, our body's going to it's going to sense this and it's going to tell the kidneys, hey, instead of getting rid of that sodium, keep it because we don't have much coming in. So aldosterone is going to be released and it's going to cause the kidneys to reabsorb some of the sodium and recirculate it back into the blood. And one thing that you need to understand is sodium reabsorption is going to aid in water reabsorption because sodium attracts water. So as it's pulling more sodium back into the blood, it's going to aid in pulling more water back into the blood. So these 2 hormones are not going to immediately adjust their production. It takes time for the body to sense the changes and send the signals to excrete those hormones. So when we have a water loading strategy, what we're doing is we're increasing our water intake. And what this is going to do is it's going to decrease the amount of vasopressin that is signaled to be released because we have so much water coming in. Our body's like, hey, we don't need to retain this water. Get rid of the vasopressin and make sure that we're continuing to get rid of some of this water. There's no need to reabsorb it because we have such a large supply coming in. So one way to do this is just increase the amount of water you're drinking, higher than your daily intake. I'm sure any of you have experienced this, not in fight week, just in general. If you drink more water, you're going to start peeing more out because your body realizes, hey, I have more water coming in. I don't need to hold on to it all. I need to get rid of it. So we can increase our intake up to about 100 milliliters per kilogram per day. We don't really need to go above this. We just need to drink more than we normally do. So for a 154-pound athlete, that's going to be about 70 kilograms. That's going to be about 7 liters of fluid or of water during this water loading period. We're going to do this for about 3 days, and then on the fourth day, it's going to be a water restriction day where we drop our water intake down a ton, and we're going to go about 15 milliliters per kilogram on that day. And I think for this 154-pound athlete, that's somewhere around 1.5 liters. So we're going to drink about 7 liters for 3 days, and then 1.5 liters for that fourth day. Our body's going to be used to excreting the amount that we take in those first 3 days, the 100 milliliters per kilogram, the 7 liters. So it's going to continue to get rid of that amount of water, even though that fourth day we only drink 1.5 liters. And one thing I need to make sure you all understand is drastic amounts are not needed. You don't need to drink 4 gallons of water to get this effect. You just need to drink more than your habitual intake to downregulate the vasopressin signaling. Just like with the glycogen depletion, these are not exact measures, but we can estimate to get somewhere around 2% body weight loss. Next is going to be sodium manipulation. So our body is about 70% water. 2/3 of that is going to be water that's inside of the cells. That's known as the intracellular fluid. And then 1/3 of that water is going to be outside of the cells. That's known as the extracellular fluid. And there's different concentrations of electrolytes inside the cells versus outside. Inside of cells, the potassium is going to be high. Outside of cells, sodium is going to be high. And our body is very protective at maintaining our blood sodium levels at about 0.9%. If we have a lower concentration than this, so we have less than 0.9% blood sodium levels, this is called hyponatremia. And what it's going to do is, to normalize this concentration, it's going to pull water from outside of the cells to inside. So it's going to pull water out of the blood and pull it into the cells to decrease the amount of water we have in our blood, which is going to increase the sodium concentration. On the other end, if we have high sodium levels and our concentration is above 0.9%, it's going to have to pull water from inside of the cells to the blood to basically dilute the sodium in the blood and restore that proper concentration of sodium. So aldosterone, like we talked about a minute ago, this is going to regulate how our body maintains its proper electrolyte concentrations. If we have if we have very low sodium intake, it's going to signal the sodium reabsorption in the kidneys, so we have less coming in, so it's going to make sure that we maintain the amount we have in our bodies. And sodium is osmotically active, which means that it attracts water. So if we have more sodium being reabsorbed, we're going to maintain or retain more water along with it. And if anyone's ever heard about people with high blood pressure and they get told to reduce their sodium, this is because when you reduce sodium, you reduce the amount of water that sodium is pulling into the blood with it. So it's decreasing the blood volume, which is ultimately going to lower their blood pressure. But the bad news is this is just a short-time acute Band-Aid. This is not a long-term chronic fix. The body is very, very smart. It's going to adjust to what it's experiencing. So if we have a low sodium intake over time, after 3 or 4 days, the body's going to readjust its aldosterone production to make sure that we keep the sodium and we're not pushing it out anymore. This is going to put us in an acute negative sodium balance for those couple days that we're not taking in much. So we're excreting more sodium than we're bringing in because we are decreasing the sodium intake to about 300 milligrams or less per day for about 3 to 4 days before weigh-in. We're going to be getting rid of more sodium than we're bringing in, which is going to take the water out with it. One way to improve the efficiency of this is to make sure that we have a relatively high intake during our camp leading into the fight week. One, it's just very good for training. Sodium is needed for muscle contractions. It's also going to improve our blood volume or increase the blood volume, which is going to thin out the blood and make it easier for the blood to move around the body and deliver oxygen to the different working muscles. Sodium is also needed to help uptake glucose into cells, and there are some transporters that need both sodium and glucose to get uptake. So if we have more sodium, we're going to improve glucose uptake to some of the muscle cells. Also, if we have a relatively high intake during camp, it's going to decrease our aldosterone production. It's going to help increase how much sodium we're pushing out of the body. The evidence is not as well established for sodium manipulation for cutting weight, but we can look at somewhere between 0.5 and 1% body weight lost through this strategy. And last we're going to talk about is fiber reduction, or a low residue diet. Gut residue is basically just undigested food that sits in the intestinal tract. If you think about dietary fiber, this is just indigestible carbohydrates, and there's many health benefits, but it's going to slow down the transit time of food throughout the digestive system. So it's going to basically increase the amount of time it takes to get from one end to the other. Fiber is also going to draw water into the intestines, which is going to help with constipation. So if anyone's ever constipated, eat some fiber. It'll pull water into the intestines and help basically flush you out. Path of food from your mouth to the other end is going to start your mouth, then go to your esophagus, down to your stomach, then into the small and large intestine. Majority of food that we eat is going to be digested in the small intestine, but the fiber, the undigestible material, is then going to move on to the large intestine to be digested. And the small and large intestine combined have a length of about 20 to 25 feet. So the entire process can take a substantial amount of time, somewhere between 2 and 5 days. If we're reducing fiber, we're going to reduce the amount of food matter that's left in the large intestines, and it's going to reduce the amount of time it takes for the food to get from one end to the other. So to do this, we're going to reduce our fiber intake to less than 15 grams per day for the 2 to 3 days before weigh-ins. We also want to make sure that we're eating foods that have low weight, So we're getting the same amount of calories for less mass of food. So we're going to have less weight of food sitting in our digestive system, in our stomach, that is ultimately going to lead to weight on the scale. We can also time our final meal before weigh-ins. The longer the lag time we have between our final meal and weighing in, the better, because it allows time for that food to either, one, completely get all the way through us and get out, or for that food to be digested, and it lowers the weight of that food rather than just sitting in the stomach fully undigested. With this fiber reduction low residue diet, we can expect to get somewhere between a 1 to 2% body weight loss. Again, very rough estimate, don't take it verbatim. So some low fiber foods, you'll notice that these are very similar, I believe the exact same as the low carbohydrate foods. So these are foods that you're going to need to eat during fight week. So meat and poultry, seafood, eggs, plain yogurt, cheese, avocado, nut butters, oils. So we want to maximize the benefit, or how much weight we get out of these strategies. So for glycogen depletion, we need to make sure that we're eating carbs during our fight camp. If we've already cut out carbs during fight camp, we're already going to be glycogen depleted coming into fight week. When we take out carbs, it's really not going to do anything, because we already took out carbs. We're not going to see any change on the scale. So to make a substantial amount of change fight week, we need to make sure that we have glycogen in the stores to be depleted during fight week. Water loading restriction, we just need to increase our water above habitual levels for that water loading period. We don't need to go too high. Again, we go too high, we risk getting low blood sodium levels, which is going to be a negative health effect on us. Next, for sodium manipulation, we want to make sure that we have somewhat of a moderate to high habitual intake. If we already have low levels coming into fight week, our body's already adjusted the hormone responses to those low amounts, so we can't really reduce it any further because we have nothing to reduce from. We won't see any changes on the scale fight week. If you don't have a habitual intake of moderate to high sodium, you can pyramid your sodium intake up about 2 weeks out from weigh-in, so that when you do decrease it, you see a substantial change on the scale. And then last, fiber reduction for our habitual intake. We just want to make sure we're getting enough fiber in during fight camp, so that when we pull it out, just like the glycogen depletion strategy, once we pull it out, we actually see a benefit. If we're not eating any, we can't basically then pull it out, because we've already pulled it out ahead of time, so we're not going to be able to use that lever to pull on to lose weight fight week. So active versus induced sweating, we're looking at active versus passive. Active is going to be, obviously, you're active, you're purposefully exercising to cause sweating or to increase your sweat rate. And then passive is going to be, like it sounds like, you're not doing anything, you're passively sweating through either a sauna or a bath. Our body is very, very regulated, and it's going to maintain its core temperature around 97 to 99 degrees. If we're exercising or we have an exposure to a warm environment, it's going to raise this temperature, And the body has many ways to regulate its temperature to prevent some heat-related illnesses, but the main one we're going to focus on is going to be sweating. There's somewhere between 2 to 4 million sweat glands on your body, on your skin, and when your body temperature begins to rise, it's going to start sweating through these pores on your skin. And what it's going to do is the sweat's going to sit on your skin, and that sweat is going to evaporate, which is going to provide a cooling effect to your body. But when we're in a sauna or a bath or we're exercising in an environment that's warm or humid enough, our body's not going to evaporate that sweat. The sweat's just going to start dripping off of us, and it's not going to provide any cooling effect. As the sweating continues, dehydration and heat illness is going to become a problem. The initial sweating is going to start pulling water from the extracellular space, so think of your blood. The longer this occurs, the higher the concentration of electrolytes in blood is going to be. So if we have a certain amount of water in our blood and a certain amount of sodium in our blood, as the water decreases, the relative amount of sodium in the blood is going to increase. This is going to cause what you call an osmotic pressure. And what it's going to do is it's going to shift water from inside of the cells to the blood to decrease those concentrations of the sodium. And what it's going to do is when it's pulling water out of the cells, it's going to dehydrate those cells. And a dehydrated cell is a less effective cell, lower function. Also, heat illness is going to become a big problem. Overheating is going to be a big red flag for us, especially when we're actively sweating or sitting in a hot tub for an extended period of time or sitting in a sauna for an extended period of time. We're going to have a lower blood volume from sweating because, again, when we sweat, we're pulling fluid from the blood. And as this blood volume decreases, your body's going to start reducing its sweat output because it wants to maintain a certain amount of blood volume. If we don't have enough blood volume, our body's not going to be able to pump blood and nutrients around the body, and it's just going to basically stop. So our body's very smart. It's going to reduce our sweat output to maintain fluid in the body. And with this lowered sweat, sweat output, it's going to have a less of an ability to regulate its body temperature, and our body temperature is going to continue to climb and climb and climb, and that's when we get to the point of overheating. So what we can do to basically counteract this or help us in this period is to heat acclimate. Just as someone who would go to elevation before competition to acclimate to the elevation, we can do the same thing with heat. We can train the body to better deal with the heat and adapt to it. What this is going to do is it's going to lead to less discomfort and physical strain from the heat exposure. It's also going to improve our sweat rate and our sweat onset. So what this means is we're going to start sweating sooner and we're going to sweat more. This is going to be a faster weight cut for us. It's going to allow us to spend less time in this hot environment and reduce the likelihood of experiencing some type of heat-related illness. To heat acclimate, you should do it specific to the method you're going to use during your weight cut. If you're going to use a sauna for your weight cut, you should heat acclimate in a sauna. Same thing for a bath, same thing for exercising. We want to have somewhere between 10 and 14 sessions to get maximum adaptations, and we want to do these sessions during fight camp, either on our easy days or our rest days. And over the course of the fight camp, as we do these heat acclimatization sessions, we want to increase the duration of the sessions over time. So the first couple sessions we may just be at 10 minutes. By the time we get to the third or fourth session, we may be up to 15 and so on and so on. If you get up to periods where you're doing sessions up to maybe like 45 minutes, I would recommend splitting those into two. So do maybe 20 minutes in the sauna, get out for 20 minutes, and then do another 20 minutes in the sauna as opposed to doing a 40-minute straight session. So into sweating, when we're actually cutting weight the week of the fight or the day before the fight or the day before the fight, we want to use either a bath or a sauna. These are active measures. These are passive strategies. If you want to use active strategies, you're more than welcome to, but I would use those to get sweat started and then get into a passive strategy to lower the stress that we place on the body. When we're in a bath or a sauna, we want to make sure these are appropriate temperatures. We don't need to get into a 114-degree bath. We're just going to cook ourselves to that point. We don't need a 200-degree sauna. You just need an environment that can get the core body temperature above 98.6 to begin the sweating process. Once you have began sweating, start a timer. Once you get to 20 to 25 minutes, somewhere in that range, get out of the bath or the sauna, and you have two paths. One, you can either just sit at room temperature or lay at room temperature and allow your body to cool down from there, or you can get out of the bath and sauna and you can get into a sauna suit and then wrap yourself in a bunch of towels, make a towel burrito. This is going to be a lower temperatured environment, so your body's going to slowly cool itself, but it's going to continue. It's going to have the added benefit of continuing to sweat while you're in this towel burrito. Regardless of the path, whenever you're finished with whichever path you choose, allow your body to fully cool down, 20 to 30 minutes or so. Dry off, and then weigh yourself to assess where you are in relation to your fight weight. See if you need to do another round, possibly another 2 rounds, etc. But I need you to understand that each successive round that you do is going to have less and less weight loss that comes with it. So if you lose 4 pounds the first time you do this, the second round you do it, you may only lose 2.5 pounds. So just understand this when you're going to cut weight. So ideally, a fight camp timeline, we're going to have a moderate to high carbohydrate intake so that we have something to pull from. We're going to have a moderate to high sodium intake, again, so we have something to pull from. A moderate to high fiber intake, again, so we have something to pull from fight week. For fiber during fight camp, every 1,000 calories you eat, have somewhere between 10 to 15 grams of fiber in those calories. That's going to be 25 to 38 grams if you're eating 2,500 calories per day, for example. Make sure you're getting enough water in to replace the fluid lost throughout the day, including training. And then also heat acclimate and make sure it's specific to the method you're going to use during your weight cut session, and have somewhere between 10 to 14 acclimation sessions. So our timeline of fight week, we're going to start our glycogen depletion with less than 50 grams per day, and we're going to start this somewhere between 5 to 7 days out from weigh-in. So let's just put a number or put a date on this. Let's say Sunday of fight week, we start our low-carb diet. And then water loading restriction, we're going to increase our water intake 4 days out from the weigh-in. So that's going to be Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday of fight week. And again, we just want to increase our water intake from what we normally drink up to about 100 milliliters per kilogram. Then on the 4th day, the day before our weigh-in, we're going to reduce that water intake to about 15 milliliters per kilogram. Next, our sodium manipulation. Ideally, we just have a moderate to high intake of sodium during fight camp. But if we don't, we can increase our sodium intake about 2 weeks out from our weigh-in. And then those last 3 days before weigh-in, we're going to reduce it down to 500 milligrams. So that Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday of fight week, we're going to reduce our sodium down to 500 milligrams. Next, we're going to look at fiber reduction. We're going to reduce our fiber to less than 15 grams per day, 2 to 3 days before weigh-in. So Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday of fight week, we're going to drop our fiber down to less than 15 grams. We're also going to have a final meal Thursday night for our Friday morning weigh-in. If our Friday weigh-in isn't until the afternoon, we can have a small meal Friday morning. Your induced sweating, more than likely this is going to be done on Friday morning. If you have a very large weight cut in terms of how much you're sweating, if you have a greater than 4% body weight cut that you're doing in terms of just specifically the induced sweating amount, I would do half of this Thursday night, half of it Friday morning. It's much better for the body to be in a dehydrated state for a longer period of time than it is to try to cut all this weight at once and get your body into a situation where it begins overheating. So now we're going to talk about the refuel post-weigh-in. There's 3 primary goals that we're trying to hit: restore fluid levels, restore electrolyte levels, so our sodium, potassium chloride, things of that nature, and then restore glycogen levels. So restore fluid, how much? Whatever you sweat out in that last weight cut phase, you need about 1.5 times that amount. So if you lose 4 pounds, if you sweat out 4 pounds in that final period, you need to drink 6 pounds of fluid back. How fast do we want to drink this? We want to drink it about 1 liter per hour. This is about 2 normal water bottles for us here in America. You want to have one of these immediately post-scale. Then you want to have another one of those water bottles about over the next 30 minutes, and then another one of those over the next 30 minutes after that. Once you get those 3 water bottles in over basically the first hour and a half post weigh-in, you can just drink normally from there up to about 1 liter per hour. With this intake, it's going to take you, in this instance where we have to drink back 6 pounds of water, it's going to take us about 3 hours to replenish all of our lost water. Now we need to talk about what's actually in the water that we're drinking. We want a hypotonic solution. That means that whatever concentration is in there in terms of carbohydrates, it is less than a 6% concentration of carbohydrates. So if we have a 1 liter bottle of water, we want less than 60 grams of water in it. If we have a higher concentration of carbs, it's going to take longer for it to get absorbed through the gut and get the fluid into the bloodstream. If we have less than 6%, it's going to influence the fluid absorption into the bloodstream. You also want to add in some electrolytes, creatine and glutamine into that first shake. This is going to improve how quickly the fluid is uptake into your bloodstream as well as into the muscle cells. And then following this first drink or this first shake, then you can just have the electrolytes. You don't need the creatine and glutamine that comes along with it. With the electrolyte levels, you want somewhere between 500 to 1,000 milligrams of sodium per liter, and that would be a very good starting point. So to restore glycogen, following the 3 shakes post weigh-in, you're somewhere between an hour and a half to 2 hours after stepping off the scale. So you have a pretty good start on your rehydration. You can begin to introduce some easy to digest, very familiar foods into your diet. These need to be foods that you're comfortable with in a vegan all camp, and you know how your body's going to react to them. Don't try to reinvent the wheel and try something new. So these foods should be stuff that are high GI foods. That means glycemic index. These are foods that digest very rapidly, things such as kid cereals, white breads, bagels, quick oats, white rice, fruits, candies, things of that nature. There's also multiple transporters in the gut, some for glucose, some for fructose. So if we utilize both of them, we can restore glycogen quicker in less time. So things such as rice cakes, that's going to be your glucose source, and then fruit jam or honey is going to be a fructose source. This is also a period when you start introducing some high carbohydrate liquids, some of those sport drinks that have a higher carbohydrate concentration. We're not so worried about rapid fluid reabsorption at this point. We're worried more about getting the glycogen and the carbohydrates in at this point. So that's when you can start using these type of drinks. How much? We need somewhere between 2 to 5 grams per pound of body weight in carbs. So a 150-pound athlete, you're going to need somewhere between 300 to 750 grams of carbs between weigh-in and fight. The greater your cut, the more you glycogen deplete, the higher your carbohydrate intake is going to be. If you, let's say you're eating carbs the entire week and you had a very small weight cut, you probably don't need to be as aggressive with your glycogen resynthesis or how many carbs you're getting back in, because you still have a moderate level of glycogen storage in your muscles. But if you had a really large weight cut and you weren't eating carbs for an entire week leading into the weigh-in, you're going to need many more carbs to help restore those depleted glycogen stores. So how fast we want to do this? Ideally, we want to start with small meals and snacks every hour on the hour. This is going to start about an hour and a half to 2 hours post weigh-in. Like I talked about, once you finish those 3 shakes, that's when you can start introducing some of these small familiar food items. Once you get up to your fight camp weight, you can transition to every 2 hours with moderate sized meals. So what this means is, let's say this 150-pound athlete weighed in 150 pounds the entire fight camp. They were around 160 pounds. That's what they feel best training at. So after those 3 shakes, they began eating small snacks and meals. And let's say we weighed in at noon. By 5 p.m., and they're at 160 pounds, they can then transition to start eating every 2 hours with a little bit larger size meals. But we never want to get too full, so we don't want these meals to get too large, because the larger the meal is, the more likelihood we have of it providing GI distress. So basically some bloating, sitting in the stomach, having to sit on the toilet for a little bit. So we want moderate sized meals to hopefully prevent this. So we never want to be too full. We never want to be hungry. We want our gas tank to be about half full at all times. And we're also going to shoot for an average of 60 grams of carbs per hour. If we're eating every 2 hours, this is going to be meals with about 120 grams of carbs. So with restoring the glycogen post weigh-in, we want a very high carb intake, and to improve the effectiveness or how quickly we basically absorb these carbs, we want a minimal fat and fiber intake, because these are going to slow down the digestive time. We also want to decrease the amount of protein we're having. This doesn't mean that we're limiting the protein we're eating, but we don't want to have a ton of protein, because protein is going to be very satiating, and we want to make sure that we improve or maintain our appetite so that we can continue to get in all the food that we need to. And I can't stress this enough, eat foods you're familiar with. Don't go to the new restaurant you heard about or the all-you-can-eat buffet post weigh-in, because you don't know how your body's going to react. Celebrate with these places after the fight. After you win, go out and have a proper celebration, but eat familiar foods post weigh-in. All right, now post-fight, your body's going to be in a very compromised state. One, from the drastic diet changes that you had over fight camp, you were in a very very high caloric deficit. But also during fight week, we made all these drastic changes to your diet. your digestive system is going to be very sensitive at this point, and you want to gradually add back in your fiber to help prevent any excess or unnecessary GI distress you might experience. Also, you went on a 8, 10, 12, however long it is, basically a fight camp during that period, and you had a very strict diet. Go and enjoy yourself. 2 to 5 days worth of indulgent meals. I would say limit it to one quote unquote cheat meal a day. But then once you're finished with this period, I would get back on the horse, be accountable, and get onto what we call a reverse diet to rebound body out of the deficit. So we're going to slowly increase our calories back up towards maintenance. And during this period, we're going to get in the gym, we're going to train, and we're going to lift to hopefully build some muscle. Because what this is going to do is, once we gain muscle, that's going to improve or increase our metabolism so that the next time that we go into a diet, we're able to still diet on more calories, which is going to make the next fight camp much easier as we have a higher metabolism. It's also going to lead to less associated fat gain post-diet. After a fight camp, if we just eat anything and everything, body fat can accumulate very quickly. So if we want to limit this, so we want to slowly increase our calories over time, try to build some muscle with it. So instead of that surplus going towards fat gain, that surplus is going towards muscle gain, which is one, going to improve our metabolism, but two, hopefully prevent some of that unnecessary fat gain that we just talked about. I believe that is it. Yep. All right. Thank you guys so much for listening. If you have any questions, feel free to reach out, and I will talk to you all next time. Peace.